in Superior, let's move on to the book now. You talk about the interviews and research you conducted at length, and it gives like fantastic insights into the process of bringing the book to life. So I wanted to know what was the most surprising, positively or negatively, when it comes to the experiences you had of researching the book and the whole process that came with it.
Well, I went into writing Superior with my eyes wide open, because having written Inferior, I understand what this landscape looks like. There's actually a surprising amount of overlap between people who are interested on the margins of academia in sex differences and those who are interested in racial differences. Right. So there is actually some weird overlap already there. And I was aware, I mean, the difference between them is sex difference research is mainstream academic research in laboratories. It's done quite a lot all over the world. Race research is not acceptable because race is understood genetically to be a social construct. And so the people who do it tend to come from a political point of view already, which sits at odds with the mainstream scientific consensus. So I knew that the people that I was going to be researching are not generally in the thick of mainstream academia. They're really on the far margins. And their lineage goes back to the beginning of the, before the Second World War. Some of them are rooted in the Nazi movement, some of them are rooted in eugenics, and this is a very kind of covert network of people, of intellectuals, very shadowy, very much on the fringes. I mean, so far on the fringes that some of them don't have any academic affiliation whatsoever. And certainly none of them that I met were geneticists. So many of them talk about genetics, but none of them are actually geneticists. They tend to be political scientists or economists or psychologists, or sometimes not even any of that, but social scientists of another kind. So their interest is clearly not a biological one. It's a scientific one, but not a biological one, and sometimes more of a political one. And they are a strange and dangerous group of people. I don't know any other way to put it. I interviewed some of them. Not all of them would give me interviews. And the most interesting for me was I asked for an interview with one man. You can read about him in the book, who... So after the Second World War, those few scientists, and some of them, they included Nazi race scientists. So there was one person in this group, Ottmar van Verschuur, who I write about in the book, who was an actual Nazi race scientist. So he conducted experiments on the bodies of Auschwitz victims, some of them children. So he was an actual Nazi race scientist. And he, along with a few other figures in the UK and in the US and elsewhere who were committed to race science, kind of kept it alive, scientific racism alive. And they had their own journal, Mankind Quarterly, which is still in print today, it's still in publication, really to disseminate the kind of scientific racism that other journals just wouldn't touch, that weren't interested. It just sat so far beyond the pale of what mainstream academia would even go near. And one of those people in that original network is still alive. He's in his 90s now, and I emailed him to ask for an interview, and he said no. I don't know for what reason. And but he did. I did send him what I was going to write about him, and he fact-checked some of it. So he told me which bits were true and which bits weren't, because I'd got details about him from other academic books and other academic publications, and he kind of wrote back to correct some of it and tell me, no, this is what happened and this is what happened. And that was kind of chilling for me, knowing who he was and knowing his history. Just having that communication with him was incredibly strange, because he is one of the key people in this entire network who for the last 70 years has helped to keep scientific racism alive.
Did he know who you are?
Well, he could have quite easily looked me up, so yeah. I don't know. Yeah, but sometimes people are very happy to talk to you even though they know that you're a journalist. Right. So, for example, the editor of Mankind Quarterly, who was then when I was writing the book, now he's moved on. He also gave me an interview, and he was very candid. He just told me everything, really long emails with lots and lots of information in them. So you never know. As a journalist, sometimes people can surprise you. Yeah. Sometimes people refuse to talk to you. Other times they'll give you everything that you ask for.
Right. I'm a little bit stunned now. When you just told me about those email exchanges, I was just imagining it in my head, and yeah, it must have been really, really chilling, especially like the last people from the period of the Nazi regime. They're dying out, the survivors as well as the perpetrators. You know, I think we know more about the survivors than the perpetrators, since some have, you know, escaped the limelight a little bit. I believe that some of them are still living very good lives, and we don't know. But oh wow, I was going to ask you, what was the most interesting thing you found during the research? But to me this was like, wow, okay. Maybe the question is redundant, but if there's anything else that was really interesting and that you didn't expect, that you would be willing to share during the research.
Well, for me, the book was kind of a personal journey in a way. It was a journalistic exercise, of course, and I tried to be as thorough as I could. And as I said, I interviewed people from right across the board. I interview mainstream geneticists on their position, some of the top geneticists in their fields, social scientists, people who've done mainstream academic research, but also people on the margins of scientific racism. And to really try and get it clear in my head, when I started writing this book, I don't think I really knew what race was. You know, we have these social ideas about what race is. We feel we can categorize ourselves. But actually ask someone to define it biologically, it's very difficult. And what writing this book has helped give me is clarity. I feel like I really understand now what it means. I have it kind of clear in my mind about where these ideas come from, what they mean, what they represent. And I hope that that clarity is something that I also leave with the reader. That's what I really want. Because I think we have, like I said, we have lots of myths and stereotypes and social and cultural ideas about what we think race is. It feels so tangible to us. But actually, to see the facts laid out, and I don't just mean the scientific facts, I mean the historical facts and cultural facts, everything, it turns everything on its head. And I don't think about things in the same way that I did now. In the same way that Inferior did for me around gender, writing Superior has really done for me around race. And I have this kind of it was really cathartic. It really helped me, I think, because I had a lot of stereotypes, a lot of baggage, as we all do, because of the societies that we live in. And it really helped me kind of work through that, and it was like cleaning through the attic in your head almost, and just organising everything for the first time.
So the process of writing answered more questions than it asked?
Well, I raised a lot of questions. For me, I felt those questions were answered, yeah.
Right, that's great. It certainly answered a lot of questions for me. So yeah, I really enjoyed the book, and it's really rigorous and detailed. And whenever you say something, and as the listener or the reader, you say, oh, but what about that? Before we can even ask the question, you answer it already. So yeah, it's a great read. What made you go from gender to race?
I feel like Superior is the book I really wanted to write all my career. You always have to be careful when you're a journalist, non-white journalist, is that you don't get typecast as just doing a certain thing, and especially if you write about race and you're non-white, then people think that's all you can do. So from a lot of my career, I have, you know, for the first bit of my career, I was just a general reporter. I reported on everything. And as a science journalist, I really just looked at engineering, physical sciences. You know, I was covering stuff that was completely unrelated. You know, things like rare earths in China or the wind turbine industry in Germany. You know, not at all anything like the topics in my two books. But I entered journalism because I got involved in the anti-racism movement when I was at university. The 80s and 90s were pretty tough in terms of race relations in this country. And I had to do that. We felt like those of us who had a position, we had to kind of do something. And that's how I started writing for the student press. And that's why I became a journalist and not an engineer, which I would have done otherwise. And so this topic and this subject has been with me forever. And I've been turning it over in my head my whole life, since I was 10 years old. And I really had to, I think writing Superior just made me feel like I could finally work through all these things that I'd been thinking all these years and get, like I said, get some clarity.
Right, so this book has been in the making in your mind for very long time.
Yeah, a long time.
And would you say that it's the urgency for you to write it was partly or fully based on personal experiences?
Although personally I wanted to write this book for a long time, convincing publishers to let you write a book on race is quite difficult, especially on this topic, which feels like a niche topic anyway. But the political situation now is so relevant to the stuff I was writing about in Superior. So I really do look at the ways in which the alt-right, for instance, have used these pseudoscientific ideas to give intellectual underpinning to their ideologies, and the ways in which in the past and now we can see parallels between the kind of rhetoric and ideas that we see being used in the way in which people gain access to people in power with these ideologies. So there are lots and lots of parallels there right the way throughout the book. And also I feel for everyone, we all need to understand in this age of identity politics what identity really means, to understand that kind of biological dimension that we think about all the time when it comes to racial identity. And I really felt like this was the right time to write it, and I had to get it out as quickly as possible and get it down as quickly as possible so that people would understand. But to be honest, it was only really at this point that I could have really convinced someone to publish it.
That's interesting, because it's more relevant now than ever.
Yeah.
So, and more urgent now than ever.